Hi, all. So, I definitely would recommend if you want to make a realistic or naturalistic portrait to spend more time on the drawing. Ideally, I would want to spend more time on this drawing and suss it out more. So, I did this very quickly. I did it in 20 minutes. So, the moral of the story for your line drawing to make it naturalistic or realistic is to spend time on your drawing. Really spend time on your drawing. It's really important. So, but I want to get to the watercolor and whitewash application of a portrait demo for you. So I got my cup of brushes, and I've got 2 cups of water, and I have my palette. This is all watercolor. So watercolor you can rehydrate, gouache you can't. And I'm going to be putting out color and mixing color as I go, and I'm going to show you on the palette. The first brush I'm going to choose is a small... Where is it at? I want my small filbert. Well, this is a small filbert, but there's one that's a little bit bigger. Here we go. So these 2 filberts, one's really small and one's medium size. And then I'm also going to pull out 2 rounds. And I'm going to grab some paper towel too. Let's see, let's put out some. So I love Holbein. Not pearl white because that's metallic. Let me find my white gouache. Okay, primary white or titanium. It's hard to get titanium white right now because we're still in the midst of the pandemic with COVID. Oops, one moment. Let me put my kitty down. Ding, down, Lovey. Come here, Lovey. So I put out some white gouache. This is primary. The brands of watercolor and gouache I prefer are Holbein, but Winsor & Newton is good also. I like Holbein a little more. White, the color white when you paint, whether it be oil, gouache, or acrylic, because with watercolor you're going to use white gouache too, is you're going to go through white a lot. Now the 2 brands that make big tubes of white gouache are Da Vinci and Winsor & Newton. Da Vinci's is actually a little bit bigger than Winsor & Newton. So I'm going to start by taking my small filbert, dipping only the tip for water control. And I have some navy blue watercolor. There we go. And I'm going to take this alizarin crimson, and I'm going to take that color, and here is my pool of saturated color. And this is, I'm blocking, so I'm filling in my line drawing. I'm blocking in first. I'm squinting and I'm blocking in. So filling in, blocking is another way to describe it, my drawing with the color that I see. So I'm being direct. I'm not building this up in layers that are a light value and the value next from that. And, I'm not being traditional that way. The watercolorists I admire, they did not work that way, like John Singer Sargent or Akins or Andrew Wyeth. just a few. I mean, they didn't work that way. They were more immediate, more direct. They used to they featured the materials well and traditionally, but they were direct like oil painting. So yeah, so I typically for a portrait, I will spend a good amount of time, like a long time on the drawing, and it is worth it for what I want to achieve. I'm just gonna add that onto there. Okay, so now I'm going to clean off my brush. And the next thing I'm going to use is I dip the tip of my brush in my white gouache, and I just want to use some of it. So right here, this part that I'm using with the brush, this is a good consistency. Well, actually, I take that back. It's a little sticky. So let me clean off my brush again. Dip the tip of my brush again in the water. Now, this is a better consistency. See this versus that? This is what you want for traditional consistency, like half and half the creamer. Okay, so now I'm going to take that color here, and this was that alizarin crimson and brown and a little bit of blue. See how it's purplish? A purplish pinky color. Fleshy. So then I'm going to take burnt sienna and some yellow ochre. So my brush is nice and loaded. And then I want to add more. I'm going to make it a little darker. There we go. So the colors individual, like there isn't a formula for the colors. This is where you have to like squint, and it's dependent upon like your reference photo or what you're working from life and what you see. So I just added a little more yellow ochre because I'm looking at parts of the reference photo and I'm like, ooh, I need this color here. So I'm mixing the watercolor with the white gouache, like what the watercolorist did in the 1800s. So for watercolor and for gouache, if you're using gouache traditionally, it's going to take about 5 minutes to dry. You can speed up the drying time with a blow dryer. I also feel like there's a lot of warmth in his face, so pull out some more colors. There, I used Naples yellow, yellow ochre, and that burnt sienna color. And I'm going to take some of the white gouache too, and I'm going to mix it. This feels a little tacky. So then I'm going to just add a little bit of water, not too much. I'm going to wait for areas to dry before I go back in with other color because I don't want it to bleed. I don't want it to do the wet into wet technique. I notice in a lot of part of his face, he's got this purplish color with like some burnt sienna. So I'm going to start blocking that color in. Always like for nostrils or like places with like deep shadow, like so like you know, you don't want to use straight black. You want it to have like a little bit of red in there. Block in because this is in shadow and then I'll develop it. See, I'll develop it further. I don't want it to feel flat. Like I'm working from a 2D image, which is flat, but I want it to have a lot of dimension. I want it to have a presence. I want it to be powerful. My portraits. So that's why I like to work on the drawing some more before going into painting. Let's say I'm doing the wet into wet technique here because it's already a wet area and I'm going in with wet pigment. There we go. Same with there. Also, like there's this shadow. This is linear there, it's not planar. You have to manipulate your brush too. So like looking at, again, this comes back to like your reference photo or from life, like, interpreting like what you see. Like, should that be a planar application like what I did right now? And yes, it should. Should this be planar? Yes, it should. And I did that. Should this be planar? Yes, it should. And I did that. Should this be planar? Yes, it should. And I just did that right now. So right now my goal is just to get everything blocked in, wait for it to dry, and then develop the features even more with more color using watercolor and white gouache for the opacity. It's good to use gouache for your lightest lights. Planar. I really want. Like, so I added some more navy blue and more of that alizarin crimson and burnt sienna. Take a little bit of that color. And then this is a little lighter. Let's see. It goes like this needs to be darker. So when you're working from a reference photo too, is that you have the advantage to look at it upside down, even when you're drawing and you're painting, to see the abstract shapes. And I definitely encourage that. Like, that's really important to do that. Let's see, let's finish this. plainer, 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 plainer. Um, dry off my brush and can use more of that white gouache. It's more of that peachy color. Plainer, 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 plainer. Okay, plainer. Okay, linear, linear. Clean off that. Okay. And I want to go back into these. Yeah, this needs to dry, and I really need to develop the structure more. Yep, you need to develop this much more. Just cover these white spaces and go back into them more. All right, so this is blocking in with watercolor and white gouache, and this is going to get developed further. Thank you.